I was downstairs in the basement, trying to unclog the drainage hole in the air conditioner when I heard the phone ring. Natalie was washing dishes in the kitchen, so I thought she would answer the call. I heard her pick it up through the ventilation vent on the second floor. "Hello, Katie. Nice to hear from you. How long has it been?" I didn't like Katie. She was Natalie's friend from high school, and I always had bad feelings about her. Fortunately, we moved from Lancaster shortly after we got married. I wished it had been a bit further. Yeah, I thought so. 8 years really flew by. What's going on? I didn't like how this conversation was going, but I only had one side of the conversation. "Katie, hold on a second. Steve is working downstairs in the basement. Let me go and close the door. I'll be right back." I heard Natalie hang up the phone as she walked through the room to close the door. I crossed the basement and quickly picked up the wall-mounted extension phone. "Hello, Katie. I'm back. So, what did you want to tell me?" "Nat, there's a medical equipment conference in Lancaster next weekend, and guess who's coming?" "You're kidding. Both of them will be there." "Both of them. They'll arrive Friday evening and stay the whole weekend." "How do you know this?" "Jared called me this morning and was dying to see you. He asked me to call and see if I could convince you to come to Lancaster for the weekend. It'll just be you, me, Jared, and Martin." I held the cloth at the end of the phone receiver. I really wanted to jump through the phone and grab Katie by the neck. What was she suggesting? "I don't know, Katie. If I can get away, I'd love to come. I'll have to butter up Steve a bit. Once I find out, I'll call you back." "Do you remember how much fun we had at the last reunion when they were here?" "Natalie, you're right. I remember. Every time I make breakfast for the kids in the morning. I can't believe you had the nerve to name that kid Jared." "Why not?" "Steve has no clue. He thinks Jared is his, even though they look nothing alike." Damn, this conversation was getting worse by the minute. I quickly ran through everything in my head and realized that Natalie and Katie had a fling with these two guys 8 years ago, and Natalie ended up getting pregnant with Jared. She passed off the child as mine, and naturally, never said anything about the affair. Now Natalie and Katie were planning to meet up with these guys again. "Katie, I'll call you back as soon as I can. If I can't stay overnight, at least I can come there for the day. It would be better than nothing." "All right, call me as soon as you find out." After we all hung up, I had some time to think. We had 3 kids. Jenny and Lynn were in high school, and Jared showed up about 8 years ago. The 2 girls are smart and doing well. They study hard at school, and both are preparing for college. Jared, on the other hand, lacks motivation. He's not interested in studying or sports. I like Jared, even with his flaws. Natalie opened the basement door. "How's it going down there, Steve? Are you ready for some coffee?" "I'm almost done. I'll be up in a minute. I think I'm going to take a shower before doing anything else." After a long hot shower, I sat in front of the TV with the family. I tried to figure out what I was going to do. This wasn't a small mistake that Natalie made and regretted. It was something intentional that she planned to do again. I didn't know if I wanted to stop it and keep the status quo or if I wanted to fix it. If I decided to fix it, I had to figure out how. I felt really foolish because in 20 years of marriage, it never crossed my mind that Natalie could be involved with someone else. "Steve, I talked to Katie from Lancaster today. She asked me to come over and spend the weekend with her. Do you have any issues with that?" "No, not really. I'll be busy at work, so as long as my parents can look after the kids, everything should be fine with one condition." "What's that?" "Make sure to take your mobile phone in case you have any problems." "All right, thank you, dear. I'll take my cell phone with me and promise that I won't have any issues. The Volvo estate never breaks down, and I can fit plenty of goodies for shopping. I'll probably leave on Friday morning and be back on Sunday evening. Is that okay?" "Sounds tempting to me. Have fun." Natalie went into the kitchen, and I overheard her calling Katie to confirm their weekend plans. She didn't seem bothered at all by the fact that she was being unfaithful or that there could be consequences. I told her I wanted to do some work on the computer before going to bed, and that I would get up later. It wasn't too difficult to find a website of the East Coast Medical Equipment Dealers Conference in Lancaster. Everything related to the conference was there. All the displays were listed with a floor map. They had a schedule of lectures and seminars with times and locations specified. There was a list of all the participants, along with their hotel room numbers. Jared Kramer and Martin Blank were staying in room 411 from Friday to Monday. I found their home addresses and phone numbers in Baltimore. I found a company that offered DNA tests by mail. The tests ranged from paternity confirmation to likely national origins. Most tests cost less than $100. Samples could be taken at home and mailed in with a check or paid for online. I filled out the application forms on the website and paid for 4 paternity tests using my PayPal. After printing out the collection instructions, I gathered everything needed to collect the samples. I printed a mailing label and prepared a padded envelope for priority shipping. I prepared several CD mailers and set aside a stack of blank CDs. Jared and Martin's wives would probably want a copy of the recording of the evening events. I worked at a corporate security consulting firm. My work schedule was flexible, but since I had some free time, I decided to take a week off. Another nice perk of the job was access to various equipment that I could use for gathering information. By that time, I had almost decided that my marriage was over. The fact that she had an affair 8 years ago and made me raise the child was bad enough, but the way she and Katie joked, making me look like a fool, was too much. I couldn't forgive that. Now she was doing it again. This was supposed to end it once and for all. The next day, I collected DNA samples from the children. They thought it was cool. Then I went to the bank and transferred almost all of our savings into a college trust fund for Jenny and Lynn, but I left $12,000 in cash. I set it up so that the trust would be secure for my wife or any cunning divorce lawyer. I took steps to cancel all credit cards and the joint account on Monday morning and opened a new account only in my name. I planned to lock up the house so Natalie would have to find another place to stay. I was sure she could find some legal way to enter the house, but I hoped that by then I would have sorted out some other matters. We could figure out things regarding our son, Jared, later. Even though he wasn't mine, I felt some responsibility for him. I pulled into Seymour Schlemp's office. Seymour had been my lawyer since we moved to Reading. He was fair and hardworking. I liked him. I explained the situation to him as best I could. He pushed me to make sure there was no chance of reconciliation. In addition to the divorce proceedings, I asked him to contact Jared Kramer and see if he could do something about his son. I offered to pay $500 in retroactive monthly child support or have Jared take custody and raise him. The last option for him was to relinquish all rights to Jared so I could arrange for his adoption. I was sure he would agree to the latter. Seymour had everything he needed. I promised to send him photos and audio recordings that he could use. He gave me the office email address and several pre-addressed envelopes for paper materials. Betty Moore was the most annoying real estate agent I had ever met. There wasn't much I liked about women, but she was a hard-working, determined worker. I gave her a list of our house and signed several powers of attorney for her. I told her she would have to get all the signatures from Natalie herself. She laughed and assured me there would be no problems. I told her the locksmith would give her a set of new keys. The best fit for this job was a wireless video camera disguised as a smoke detector. I picked up 2 of them and grabbed 4 bugs as well. I also needed a clipboard, a set of company logo stickers, and 3 laptops. I filled out a replacement request for the faulty smoke detector in room 411 on the company's form. I would fit the computers and all the recording equipment into a regular suitcase. I took a small step ladder. There was a vacant room 311 at the hotel, and I booked it under a different name, just for Friday. It had wireless internet access. The mall had the best deal on disposable cell phones. I took 2 of them, just in case. My mom and dad moved to an old farmhouse near Lebanon several years ago. It was too big for just the two of them, but it had always been my dad's dream. He had a big vegetable garden, chickens, and an orchard. Jared loved going there. They were more than willing to put up with this for as long as needed. My dad liked Jared but called him Jake. He said Jared sounded like a sandwich salesman. Jared seemed to prefer the name Jake over his real one. A few years ago, Dad bought a big mobile home and a little Kia to tow it with. He used it 3 times and lost interest. I told Dad to get the mobile home ready and prepared. I knew the girls would be upset about leaving their friends for the summer. They had 1 more year in high school before college, and they wanted to finish it at a prep school in Vermont. Natalie didn't want to spend the money. Even though they were a year apart, they were in the same class. Don't ask. I had no idea how Jared would take it. I'll deal with the school situation later. Right now, I had other problems. At least all the kids enjoyed being with my mom and dad. Natalie left early the next morning. She was in tears and thanked me again for letting her spend time with her friends. I told the kids to get ready for the trip and pack enough stuff for the whole summer. As I suspected, the girls were thrilled. I told them to grab brochures from Burlington Prep School, and suddenly everything seemed bright. They took all their school clothes just in case. Surprisingly, Jared seemed excited about the trip. Jenny came up to me and just stood there. "What do you need, Jenny? Have you packed everything?" "Dad, I'm 17. I'm not a child anymore. Tell me what's going on. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Do you have problems with Mom? I don't think that's something I want to discuss with you. If something were going on, your mom and I would try to keep it from you. Why don't you finish packing your things?" "No, Dad, I'm serious. This time it feels different. Lynn and I want to know what's going on. We feel like we have the right to know." I didn't want to talk to her about this, but I knew it would come out sooner or later. "All right, I'm not very happy with the relationship between your mother and me right now. Things aren't going well for us. I'm not sure exactly what's wrong, but I know something's not right. Is Mom being unfaithful?" I remained silent for a long time. "I'm not sure, but I think so." Jenny turned around and yelled up the stairs, "You were right. Lynn, what does all this mean?" "I'll let Lynn tell you better." Lynn was coming down the stairs towards Jenny and me. "Tell him, Lynn. Do I have to do this?" "Yes, he knows, but you still should tell him." Lynn looked down at her feet. Finally, she spoke. "About 4 months ago, I was skipping school with a guy from my lab class. We stopped by home so I could buy some CDs. It was a Wednesday, Mom's usual shopping day. I think you were at work in Boston. As we walked down the street, we saw a gold SUV pull up to the driveway. That guy, Floyd, who works with you, got out, and Mom let him in. We waited outside for almost 2 hours until he came out. I waited another 10 minutes and went inside. Mom was in the shower and the bed in your room was messy. I left and went back to school before the day ended. When we got home, she cooked dinner. The bed was made, and there was a stack of sheets in the dryer. I told Jenny, but she didn't believe me. 30 seconds passed without anyone saying anything. "Thank you for telling me, girls. It's something I never wanted to hear, but I'm glad you told me." Jenny noticed a tear in my eye. She grabbed Lynn's hand, and they went upstairs without saying another word. Dad showed up just as the locksmith arrived. While they were changing the locks, I threw all of Natalie's clothes, shoes, and personal belongings into 150-liter trash bags. The bags nearly filled the back of my car. After discussing with the girls, I decided to stay at work before heading to the conference. Centrax was a company that started at the local level but rapidly expanded nationwide. Their marketing experts did a great job finding potential areas for expansion, but the company couldn't train people fast enough to manage them, especially in management roles. They tried to persuade me to move to the new office and offered me several different locations, trying to entice me. Natalie refused to move and didn't even want to discuss it. If I stayed where I was, I'd be stuck in the same position forever. Moving would give me a promotion, more money, and some authority. I headed straight to the company president's office. "Can Mr. Turcotte spare a couple of minutes for me? I think he can fit you into his schedule." "Just wait a minute." I always liked Mr. Turcotte's secretary, and I think she felt the same way about me. George Turcotte came out of his office and shook my hand. "I hope you're here to give me good news, Steve." "Well, yes and no." "Helen, bring some coffee to the office and hold my calls for a bit." "What can I do for you, Steve?" "Firstly, I've decided that I'd like to be considered for one of the new managerial positions on site where you think I'd be most beneficial." "That's great news. If you don't have a preference, I have an excellent position in mind that I'd like you to take." "How would you feel about Anchorage?" "Believe it or not, it sounds perfect. Are you okay with the first week of September?" "I think that will work. I'll personally handle all of that on Monday." "What's next?" "Well, I know this sounds strange, but I would like Floyd Cooper to be told to work under me." George leaned back in his chair and started chuckling. "You found out, didn't you?" "I don't understand what you mean, George." I couldn't keep a serious expression when I said that. "Steve, no one wanted to tell you anything. I didn't like what was going on, but I didn't know what to do about it. If I fired Floyd, I was afraid you'd find out, and I didn't want that to happen. I decided it was best to try to keep it a secret. Unfortunately, Floyd Cooper has a loose tongue. He started bragging about his affair with your wife. His secretary, Tracy, came to me and complained when Floyd started showing everyone photos of him and your wife that he had uploaded to his computer. The legal department is working on something right now, but I've kept them on a short leash trying to protect you. Now that you know, I can simply fire Floyd. It's far more practical than spending money sending him to Alaska for you to fire him there." "Fair enough. I had hoped to cause a bit more damage, but I suppose revenge is a rather poor method of control. I'll agree to whatever you deem fair." George pressed the intercom button. "Helen, connect me to Tracy Tolliver." Explaining to Tracy what we were doing, we went down to Floyd's office. Floyd was working in Allentown. Tracy Tolliver was a very attractive woman. She was just under 30 and aging very well. The combination of chestnut hair and blue eyes always captivated me. She stood just a few inches over 150 centimeters, but carried herself like an Amazon. I never understood how Floyd had the best receptionist in the whole building. Later, I found out that she had asked 3 times to be transferred to my office, but my secretary wouldn't budge. "You'll need these." She handed over 4 blank CDs. "Look in the pending invoices section and click on Stoddard. Make one for yourself, one for your lawyer, one for our legal department, and one for Floyd's wife. I have the mailings ready, but I need the name of your attorney." I was stunned by her efficiency. This woman knew what she was doing and exactly how to do it. "Seymour Schlamp. His office is on Franklin Street." George and I entered Floyd's office while Tracy was typing in the final address. There were 20 photos of Floyd and Natalie, engaged in every imaginable kind of inappropriate activity. They were of poor quality and looked like they were taken from a webcam. It also meant that Floyd probably had a full-length video somewhere. They weren't taken in our bedroom. George tried to be polite about it all, but he couldn't help but stare at my wife. I was a bit dismayed because every guy in the building probably saw what I was looking at now. After checking them all, I simply copied the file onto each of the blank CDs. Tracy poked her head into the room. "Delete the file once you're done copying this stuff." I handed Tracy the 4 discs. She put each of them in an envelope and gave me one back. "Don't let your kids get a hold of this. I'll send these 3 out Monday morning." I told George about my plans at the hotel. He didn't like that the company was involved, but he agreed with it. There was a work crew in the area on Monday, and he said he'd ask them to come by and remove the cameras I was planning to install. George and I shook hands. I thanked him, and he thanked me. I think it was a good meeting. The trip from Reading to Lancaster took about an hour. After parking in the backyard, I checked in. paid in cash, and got the keys. The first thing I did was change into my work clothes. The maid on the fourth floor was quite friendly. I showed her my work order, and since no one had checked into the room yet, she let me in. Installing the fake smoke detectors took only about 20 minutes. There were 2 king-size beds in the room. I was able to position the cameras to get a good shot of each bed in parts of the room. Don't worry, I was a professional. I hoped none of the guests would notice they were in a room with 3 smoke detectors. I returned to the room, changed, and started setting up all my equipment. The pizza delivery guy arrived about half an hour later. By 3 o'clock, everything was ready. Both cameras worked great. The pictures were clear even in normal room lighting. My laptop was on and running with a good high-speed connection. One camera was set to record every movement automatically, and I manually operated the other. Dan, I loved my job. I had one problem. I didn't know where Natalie was. I dialed her number on my cell. Hi, Steve. Isn't caller ID a great thing? Hi, Natalie. Just checking if everything's okay. The kids are with my parents, and I'm still at work. Where are you now? We're still at Katie's. Her husband, Ray, is going to watch their kids. Katie and I are staying overnight at Melanie Thompson's house. There will be a couple of other girls from school. It should be fun. Sounds like fun. Take some pictures. In your dreams? Pervert. Who's this guy Ray with Katie? Do I know him? I think so. It's Ray Wilson. He was on your football team. Oh, right. I remember Ray. What does he look like? A bit heavier, a bit balder, and a bit softer. Sounds like regular aging to me. Okay, Natalie, I'll let you go. Have fun and call if there are any issues. Love you. Love you back. Bye. I remembered well that Ray was a big jerk and unpleasant to deal with. If they were about to leave, it meant they would be here soon. I figured they would use Natalie's car, which suited me just fine. Around that time, there was some activity in the room. Camera number 1 started recording just as it was set up. There was a lot of idle chatter about the trip and other trivial matters. They were both quite big guys. Jared had dark hair and dark eyes, while Martin was a bit balding and looked pale. Both seemed to be in good shape. Bug registered Jared's mobile phone ring. Hi, it's Ray. How can I assist you? They both seemed delighted by this. I wondered how many times they had used this before. We're here, sweetheart, and we're eager to chat. What do you fancy? I assumed you were talking to Katie. All right, it's the Boondocks. We'll meet you downstairs in about 2 minutes. At least they were planning to feed them first. I sat there, boiling with anger over all of this. If I hadn't been so engrossed in the mechanics of what I was doing, I probably would have been preparing to stop someone. I immediately left the room and headed towards the stairs at the end of the corridor. Standing around the building's corner, I could see Natalie and Katie waiting in the lobby. They giggled like a pair of schoolgirls. A minute later, Jared and Martin came out of the elevator. Natalie immediately took Jared's hand and kissed him on the cheek, like a wife kisses her husband. The 4 of them walked out and got into the black Mercedes. As they drove off, I surveyed the parking lot and spotted the Volvo parked in the back row. At least she was trying to behave a bit discreetly. About 5 minutes later, I was loading bags of her clothes and other items into the car. I was sure she would return from the restaurant slightly tipsy and wouldn't notice anything in the car. I left a note on the driver's seat explaining that the locks had been changed at the house and that I was taking the kids on an extended vacation. I headed to Taco Bell and fueled myself for the rest of the night. They were having ribs and I was having a high-quality burrito. Life just isn't fair. I returned to my room and waited for the inevitable. I tried to think of a few more things I could do. I had about an hour until they returned to the room. I knew what would happen when they arrived. What I didn't know was exactly what I was going to do. Well, I largely came to the conclusion that they didn't gather to play canasta. I knew what would happen for the rest of the evening, and I didn't like it. I thought we had a good life with Natalie. I assumed she was happy because she never complained and didn't show any signs of being dissatisfied. She fed me all sorts of nonsense when Jared was born. She said she was glad we had a boy because every man should have a son. I wondered if she had called Jared's real father and congratulated him at the first opportunity. Damn, thinking about it was depressing. I regretted all the years spent with this woman who could deceive me out of the blue and not feel guilty about it at all. A woman who could make me raise another man's child and find it amusing. It was hard to feel any sympathy towards her at that moment. I continued preparing everything. Maybe I was too prepared, but it was the only chance I had, and I didn't want to miss anything. They burst into the room laughing and giggling. Martin brought a bottle of something, and within the first minute they filled 4 glasses. Katie grabbed 2 pillows from the bed and threw them on the floor. All right, let's begin. The winner gets top marks. At these words, there was an explosion of laughter. How are we going to have a group activity when there are only 2 guys? Natalie picked up on this question. Hey, girls also love it when they're appreciated. After a long bout of giggles, Katie and Natalie took off their tops, bras, and dropped to their knees in front of the guys. 2 pairs of pants and boxers hit the floor a second later. Both girls had wide smiles on their faces when Katie shouted, "Go ahead." I couldn't believe I was watching my wife do it with such enthusiasm. It was a competition that the 4 of them enjoyed to the fullest. I was not only angry but also jealous. The cameras were working perfectly. I had to distract myself from the situation to make sure I captured everything. Since I could control the camera's zoom manually, I recorded a couple of minutes of excellent interactions. It was almost as good as a regular adult movie. They kept doing it again and again. And then there was a break in room 411. Katie went to take a shower while Natalie brushed her teeth. Jared and Martin were just relaxing with a couple of drinks. I took a disposable phone and dialed Baltimore. "Hello, Mrs. Kramer. This is Walter Perkins from the Medical Equipment Conference in Lancaster. Are you Mr. Jared Kramer's wife?" "Yes, but he's not here right now." "I know. Your husband and Mr. Blank received special recognition tonight at the conference. We'd like to send you photos from the ceremony by email. Do you have an email account where we could send them?" "Of course, here it is." "That's great. Do you happen to have Martin Blank's wife's email address so I can send the photos together?" "Sure, here it is." "All right, that's all I need. The photos will be with you in a few minutes." Sure, she could track transmissions through the hotel's wireless network, but it didn't matter to me because I had no connection. There was a lull in conversation in room 411 as they caught their breath. "So, Natalie, is your dear husband taking good care of my son instead of me?" "Of course, silly. It's been 8 years, and this person still hasn't figured out that the child isn't his. Steve lives in his own world. He wouldn't understand even if a letter came in the mail. It would be nice if you occasionally sent a birthday gift or something like that." "Oh yes, that would be cool. All he needs is to see something like that to give him a clue." Katie chimed in. "I have 3 kids running around at home, and my husband isn't the father to any of them. He's so busy with his work that he would never understand they're not his." Everyone had a good laugh at poor Ray's expense, and I ended up with a good audio clip. I got tired of all these events, so I decided to put them off until the night. I logged onto the streaming site and chose an unused room. After a few recordings, I had a live stream from room 411 broadcasting to the website. I added a headline to the page, "Natalie and Katie with Jared and Martin." My wife and her friend thought the break was over and started getting close with the guys again. The internet stream was going well, and the viewer count crossed 100. It took me about 20 minutes to gather everything for the exit. I left the computer with the live stream running as a parting gift. By that time, over 400 viewers were watching the show, and I'm sure a few were recording it for later distribution. I shut down the final setup and called Ray Wilson. "Hey Ray, are you sober?" "Yeah, who's this?" "Just a friend, Ray. I want you to listen to something. I played a short audio clip I made with Katie. Where did you get this? Ray, she's in room 411. There are 2 guys there, and they're pretty big. So if you're planning to go, take a bat or something. Otherwise they might beat you up. Ray didn't say another word, and I heard the phone disconnect. I had just finished loading the GPS when Ray jumped out of the Ford pickup with a short aluminum bat and stormed into the building. I was tired, but I enjoyed the ride back. The mobile home was all set up. I handed Dad a set of keys to the new home. Mom had gone to Lancaster to visit Natalie at her parents' house, while Dad drove some guys to our place and helped move all the furniture and stuff. They had enough space to store things in the shed. Mom thought it would be interesting to hear Natalie's version. My parents had the number of one of the phones they threw away. I kept my cell, but planned to keep it mostly off. Dad will take things back to Centrax on Monday. It was late to set out, but I wanted to be far away when Natalie realized what was happening. We had a van parking spot reserved near Hagerstown, where we could hit the highway nicely in the morning. The girls planned the trip for us. They did a pretty good job. The only thing I did was shorten the distance between stops because gas was killing me. I was glad I brought plenty of cash. We spent 3 days at Disney and were heading to Chattanooga to visit the aquarium. Jenny asked if she could call Mom. Hi, Mom, it's Jenny. Yes, just wanted to let you know everything was fine. Yes, I know. We're all having a good time. Even Jared, we miss you too. We'll call every couple of days to update you. Okay, tomorrow night we're heading to Orlando. We'll be at Disney for almost a week. We have tickets to the park every day. I couldn't believe it. My daughter was covering for her mother. How cool is that? We're staying at the Orleans Hotel right at Disneyland. It's going to be so great. Okay, we'll call you in a couple of days. Bye, Jenny. I can't believe you did that. It was really upsetting. I know, Lynn and I thought it would be appropriate. You do realize that your mom is on the phone right now talking about the plane ticket and hotel reservation. We figured she should do that. She still needs a vacation. Lynn interjected. Jared was watching a DVD and enjoying his own company. 2 weeks later, Lynn called her mother. Natalie was very upset because she had been looking for us in Orlando for a whole week. Lynn said that instead, we stopped at Six Flags and tried to change the subject. Lynn and Jenny kept her on the phone for almost 20 minutes, listening to her ramblings. Eventually, Jenny said she was sorry if she missled her and promised to call her back in a couple of days. My little demons giggled for another half hour after hanging up. The next week was restless. We parked at the Smoky Mountains, and the kids were busy while I took care of business. Seymour delivered divorce papers to Natalie. She had no idea I was doing this until he showed up. He said she had a seizure. He explained that she could hire a lawyer to contest the divorce, and told her what she was up against. He had photos of her and Floyd, the group in room 411, and DNA test results. Jenny and Lynn were mine, but not Jared. Natalie hired a lawyer, but eventually agreed to what Seymour proposed. Seymour visited Big Jared at the hospital in Baltimore. Katie's husband did a great job on him and Martin. Ray was facing about 5 years in prison. I asked Seymour to help him. Both of my wife's partners stayed in the hospital for over a week, and while they were recovering, they were handed divorce papers. They had nowhere to go when they were discharged. Jared signed a paper renouncing all rights to his son Jared. In addition to broken bones and ribs, Ray literally crushed the genital area with a bat. Doctors didn't have much hope for his recovery. Betty Moore found a buyer for the house. She spent a lot of time convincing Natalie to sign all the papers, but in the end, she wore her out. I didn't need to sign anything or be present at the closing due to the power of attorney I signed. Summer was quickly coming to an end. I had a chance to improve my relationship with the kids. I spent a lot of time talking to Jared. He liked the farm where Mom and Dad lived. I asked him if he would like to stay on the farm full-time, and he jumped at the chance. Dad really liked having him around, and I knew he would be happy to take him in. Seymour filed adoption papers so that my parents would have legal authority to provide for him and take care of him. The only thing Seymour didn't like doing was making Natalie agree to it. Natalie didn't know this, but Dad also officially changed Jared's name to Jake. The girls fell in love with the school in Burlington. The end of summer in Vermont was beautiful. We spent a few days getting them settled, and then Jake and I headed back to Keystone State. I contacted Mr. Turcotte and found out that everything was ready for my move to Alaska. Tracy was already on site and had set up a temporary office. That was good news. She also had an apartment for me and a company car ready for my arrival. I left the motor home with Dad to get rid of it. 6 months later, everything finally settled. The divorce was final. The girls did well in school, and both received scholarships to James Madison University in Virginia. They were happy and excited to be on their own. They hadn't heard anything from Natalie except for a few phone calls. Jake's grades in school were improving, and he was deeply into his new hobby, raising chickens. One day, Natalie came to visit him. She was driving an old Ford Escort and told Dad that she had to sell the Volvo to cover divorce expenses. That was nonsense because in the end, I paid both lawyers. While she was there, Natalie insisted on calling Jake Jared. Jake corrected her every time and eventually walked away. Natalie continued to vent to my dad about how awful it was to take away a child's birthright. Dad said it was too easy a shot, so he passed it up and just left with Jake. Jake's mother never came back to him. She got $11,000 from selling the house. She and Katie decided to celebrate the divorce and went to Las Vegas. All the money was gone in 4 days. I don't know what Natalie is doing now or where she lives. Maybe she moved to Baltimore. Needless to say, I love Alaska. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.